نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this system of teaching and learning such that He has designated certain means, certain asbab, as we call them in Arabic, for acquiring knowledge. These asbab, these means, are important because knowledge in the sight of Islam is something sacred. It's something very honorable. The Prophet ﷺ tells us that the bearers of knowledge are the heirs of the Prophets ﷺ, the heirs, the inheritors. And the Prophets ﷺ did not leave gold or silver behind as a legacy. They left knowledge behind. So whoever takes this knowledge has gotten something very big. So knowledge has always been looked at with a very high regard by Muslims. And anything that helps us acquire knowledge is also looked at with very high regard. And one of the biggest means of us acquiring knowledge is our teachers. So because knowledge is special, our teachers become special because they help us obtain knowledge. Of course, not everything that the teacher knows is transferred automatically to the students. Rather, according to the way that the student presents themselves in front of the teacher, they will benefit from that teacher. Islam has a very strong tradition of adab, respect, and respectful behavior with anyone that we seek knowledge from. It originates with the Prophet ﷺ himself. Sahaba radiyallahu anhum used to sit in front of him so still that the riwayat mentioned كَأَنَّمَا عَلَى رُؤُوسِهِمُ الطَّيْرِ, as if there were birds perched upon their heads. They would sit so still, focused, still. No, the Prophet ﷺ wasn't always telling them amazing stories, shocking events, something very powerful and moving. No. Many times there were stories that they had already heard before. There were verses that they already knew. There were ahkam, commandments of deen, which were not the most exciting thing, but they were important nevertheless. Irrespective of what was being taught by the Prophet ﷺ, Sahaba radiallahu anhu maintained a sense of extreme courtesy and respect in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Quran emphasized this. The Quran emphasized this. It told them that don't raise your voice above the voice in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. لَا تَرْفَعُوا أَصْوَاتَكُمْ فَوْقَ صَوْتِ النَّبِيِّ. And if you do that, all your good deeds will go to waste. So any act that was contrary to respect and adab was looked at, was described in the Quran as a means of losing the rewards of our good deeds. And that's what happens when a person acquires adab, acquires a high sense of behavior, and then they don't uphold it, it becomes a means of many of the good deeds going to waste. So after the Sahaba, their students, and those after them, and it continued up till today, anywhere where the Islamic knowledge is taught in any meaningful way, at any meaningful level, it's always taught with a sense of adab, also with a sense of discipline, with a sense of very high behavioral expectations. Because knowledge has always come with that. It's never been that you had people acquiring knowledge of deen, knowledge of Islam, but not acquiring the behavior that went with it. It always goes hand in hand. So if we want to benefit from the knowledge, we show adab first to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah is watching me, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has designated these things and these people as my means. My object is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. And the way I treat these people, the way I treat my teachers, for example, is going to be a matter of decision by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as to how much knowledge I get and what kind of knowledge I get. So much so that the saying in Farsi, in Persian, is that ba adab ba nasib, be adab be nasib. A person who has adab, who has a high sense of conduct, they will also have good things lying in store for them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up doors for them. And someone who lacks adab is also going to lack their share of good things coming their way. And there are so many stories of this type, just of adab. So maybe inshallah from time to time we will touch upon this. But the message is never ever compromise adab for a teacher. No matter what's happening at that time. Even if the teacher happens to be incorrect in a matter, and we're dealing with something on behalf of a teacher that is incorrect, we will deal with it, but always with a sense of courtesy and respect. We'll never raise our voices in front of our teachers. We'll never stare at them in the face in a disrespectful way. If they're teaching us, we'll pay close attention to what they're saying. We'll never cut them off. We'll never create a disruption or something that will distract them. And we will never ever do something that causes them grief and pain from our side. That is the worst possible thing that a student could do, is cause pain to a teacher or cause anguish inside the heart of a teacher. Because if that happens, then the doors of benefiting from that teacher are closed until they forgive us. Rather, acting in such a way that the teacher makes dua for us from their heart, this is the way that we need to interact with our teachers. Like Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he knew that the Prophet ﷺ is going to get up for tahajjud at a certain time, and at that time he's going to need water. So he just had the water prepared for him. The Prophet ﷺ didn't ask him to. He was a young child, but he figured that this is probably something I should do on his own. When the Prophet ﷺ asked his family that who put the water out that night, they said, oh, it was Abdullah ibn Abbas. The Prophet ﷺ made dua from his heart. Allahumma faqihhu fi d-din wa allimhu at-ta'wil. Oh Allah, give him the understanding of deen and teach him the meanings and the interpretations of the Quran. And there you go, he became the greatest mufassir of the Quran. So it is through the du'as of our teachers and through their love, through their attention and nurturing that we will make such progress that we cannot make just based on our own intellectual abilities, our brains, our smarts. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to deal with our teachers in such a way that the doors of knowledge are opened for us. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi.